What if I told you about a guy who was a multi-time All-Star, a player who could do it all on the court, and was once considered one of the most dominant big men in the NBA, just disappeared one day? That's what happened to our guy, DeMarcus Cousins. One minute he was the centerpiece of the Sacramento Kings and one of the best centers in the league, and the next, he was struggling to even get a contract. But how did a player with so much potential fall from grace so quickly? Where did he go? And where is he now? To understand what happened to Boogie, we have to go back to the beginning where this whole thing started. DeMarcus Cousins was born on August 13th, 1990, in Mobile, Alabama, where he attended LaFleur Magnet High School. Right away, he stood out. At nearly 7 feet tall, with soft hands and surprising agility, he was a nightmare for high school opponents. He was named a Parade All-American and was also selected to play in 2 of the biggest national high school showcases, the Nike Hoop Summit and the Jordan Brand Classic. These games feature the best high school players in the country, and Cousins fit right in. Cousins helped his high school team make deep playoff runs and earned national attention along the way. He was a 5-star recruit and ranked among the top players in the country by every major scouting service. Initially, Cousins committed to the University of Alabama, then switched to Memphis to play under coach John Calipari. But when Calipari accepted the job at the University of Kentucky, Boogie followed him there. At Kentucky, Cousins only played 1 season, but he made it count. He averaged 15 points, 9 rebounds, and almost 2 blocks per game. He was a dominant force inside, helping Kentucky reach the Elite 8 of the NCAA tournament. After just 1 year in college, Cousins declared for the NBA draft. He was ready for the next level, and scouts believe he had all the tools to become a franchise player. In the 2010 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings selected Cousins with the 5th overall pick. Right from the start, he showed flashes of greatness. He made the NBA All-Rookie First Team and quickly became one of the Kings' top players. He could score in the post, knock down mid-range jumpers, rebound, and pass. Few big men had that kind of all-around game, but Cousins also brought something else with him: emotion, and a lot of it. And that didn't always work in his favor. In his rookie year, he had a public fallout with then head coach Paul Westphal. The tension grew so high that the Kings fired Westphal early in the season. And while many believe Cousins was in the right, it was the first of many incidents that began to shape his reputation as a difficult player. Between 2012 and 2014, Cousins made huge strides on the court. His scoring and rebounding numbers continued to rise. He had games where he looked like the best big man in the league. He was putting up 20-point, 15-rebound nights like it was literally nothing. But his temper was still a problem. He was suspended multiple times, got into arguments with referees, opponents, and sometimes even the media. And it wasn't that he didn't care. He just cared too much at times. And the way he showed his frustrations is often what hurt his image. Despite all that, the Kings believed in his talent and signed him to a 4-year, $62 million contract extension in 2013. They were willing to deal with the drama because Cousins was just that good. And statistically, he backed it up. He became more efficient, improved his passing, and even started to extend his range. But as good as he was individually, the Kings as a team were struggling badly. By 2014, DeMarcus Cousins had officially entered his prime. He was named to his first All-Star team in 2015 and would go on to be selected 4 times. He averaged more than 25 points and 10 rebounds per game over multiple seasons, a feat very few players, even elite ones, would ever achieve. He also started adding the 3-point shot to his game, making him even harder to guard. Most big men lived in the paint, but Cousins could stretch the floor, and he wasn't just scoring. He was also dishing out assists, grabbing steals, and blocking shots. His basketball IQ was high, and when he was focused, he could dominate every part of the game. Some of his performances were historic. He once dropped 55 points in a single game. He recorded multiple triple-doubles and won Western Conference Player of the Week honors several times. On paper, he was doing everything a superstar should. But despite his efforts, the Kings kept losing year after year. They constantly missed the playoffs. And it wasn't because of Cousins. It was everything else around him. One of the biggest problems during Cousins' time in Sacramento was the front office. The Kings made a series of poor draft decisions that left the team without the talent needed to support their star player. And here are a few of these mistakes. In 2011, they traded down to draft Jimmy Fredette instead of players like Klay Thompson or Kawhi Leonard. In 2012, they passed on Damian Lillard to take Thomas Robinson, who was out of the league literally a few years later. In 2013, they took Ben McLemore over CJ McCollum. In 2014, they selected Nick Stauskas instead of Zach LaVine. And in 2015, they chose Willie Cauley-Stein, another center, over Devin Booker. Time and time again, the Kings missed chances to add future stars. Cousins was stuck carrying a weak roster with very little help, and the coaching carousel didn't help either. Over 7 seasons, he played under 6 different head coaches. There was no stability, no clear system, and no consistent culture. The firing of head coach Mike Malone in 2014 was a turning point. Cousins had finally developed a strong relationship with a coach who understood him. Malone emphasized defense, accountability, and structure, and Cousins responded well. The team was actually winning games, but when Cousins missed time due to illness, the Kings lost a few games and the front office panicked. They fired Malone mid-season and things quickly unraveled. The team hired George Karl, who never connected with Cousins. Rumors were swirling that Karl wanted Cousins traded. The tension between the two was obvious, and the team once again sank to the bottom of the standings. Cousins continued to put up big numbers, but the losing wore on him. He became more frustrated, more emotional, and more vocal. By 2017, the Kings decided they had seen enough. Despite his talent, they felt Cousins was holding the team back. Talk about ironic. They wanted a culture change and traded him to the New Orleans Pelicans during the All-Star break. And in return, they got a rookie Buddy Hield, a veteran Tyreke Evans whom they drafted in 2009, and a first-round pick. Many fans and analysts believe the Kings got too little in return. But for the team, it was more about moving on from Boogie than what they got back. After years of frustration in Sacramento, DeMarcus Cousins finally got a fresh start. Now, being a member of the New Orleans Pelicans, joining forces with fellow big man Anthony Davis. The pairing of these two elite frontcourt players was something the league hadn't seen in a long time. Both could score, rebound, pass, and defend. Fans and analysts initially called them the Twin Towers, which was a nod to the dominant duos from the past. But eventually they settled in on the nickname Fire and Ice. Cousins, known for his fiery, emotional style, saw himself as the fire, while Davis, who's more composed on the court, was the ice. And for a while, it looked like the perfect match. The chemistry between Cousins and Davis was clear from the start. They weren't just sharing the court, they were thriving together. Cousins no longer had to carry the entire offense by himself. He had another all-star beside him, and both players benefited. The Pelicans had been a middle-of-the-pack team in the West, but after Boogie arrived, they started to climb the rankings. By the 2017-2018 season, they were finally gaining momentum. They went from outside of the playoff picture to fighting for a top 6 seed. Cousins was putting up incredible numbers, and in one game, he dropped 44 points, grabbed 23 rebounds, and handed out 10 assists. A stat line that is almost unheard of for a center, or for a player for that matter. He earned multiple Player of the Week honors and was selected to the All-Star game once again. He was scoring at will, bullying defenders inside, and stretching the floor with his three-point shot. He was also passing like a guard, creating offense for his teammates, and playing some of the most complete basketball of his career. It was the version of DeMarcus Cousins everyone had been waiting for. A dominant force on a playoff-bound team. He was on track for a massive payday in free agency, likely worth well over $100 million. Everything was falling into place. Then came January 26, 2018. Late in the game against the Houston Rockets, Cousins hustled for a loose ball after missing a free throw. And as he stepped towards the ball, he suddenly collapsed, grabbing his leg in pain. He had torn his left Achilles tendon, one of the worst injuries a basketball player can suffer, especially for someone of his size and playing style. And just like that, everything changed. The injury ended his season, and he never played another game for the Pelicans. It was a heartbreaking moment, not just for Cousins, but for the team as well. New Orleans still made the playoffs without him, even sweeping the Portland Trail Blazers in the first round. But the future looked uncertain. Cousins' injury was serious, and teams across the league knew that recovering from a torn Achilles was tough, particularly for a big man. The explosive movement, the agility, the second jumps, those things often don't come back the same. It wasn't just a setback, it was a major turning point. The summer of 2018 was supposed to be when Cousins signed the biggest deal of his career. Instead, coming off that Achilles tear, no team was willing to offer him a long-term contract. Even short-term offers were scarce. So he made a surprising decision. He signed a one-year, $5.3 million deal with the Golden State Warriors. At the time, the Warriors were a dynasty, with stars like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. They were already favorites to win the title. Adding Cousins, if healthy, felt almost unfair. But that was the key, if healthy. Cousins spent most of the 2018-2019 season rehabbing. He made his return in January of 2019 and showed flashes of the old Boogie. He had nights where he scored efficiently, played solid defense, and looked like he was getting back into form. But just as he was starting to find rhythm, disaster struck again. During the playoffs, in only his second postseason game ever, Cousins tore his left quadricep muscle while driving for a loose ball. It was another crushing injury, and this time, it happened on the biggest stage. He missed most of the playoffs, but fought to return for the NBA Finals. He did manage to play in the finals against the Toronto Raptors, but he clearly wasn't himself. He was slower, less mobile, and couldn't defend the pick and roll like he used to. Still, he pushed through and gave the Warriors quality minutes off the bench. But it wasn't enough. The Raptors won the series in 6 games, and Cousins' chance at a championship slipped away. He went into free agency again, still searching for stability. In 2019, Cousins joined the Los Angeles Lakers, reuniting with Anthony Davis, who was also now in LA. The hope was that they could pick up where they left off in New Orleans. The Lakers, led by LeBron James, were building a title contender. But once again, Cousins never got the chance to prove himself. During a summer workout in Las Vegas, he tore his ACL, his third serious leg injury in less than 2 years. It was another devastating blow. The Lakers waived him mid-season to make room on the roster. Cousins didn't play a single game for them, but in a sign of respect, the team still awarded him a championship ring when they won the NBA title in 2020. It was a small silver lining in an otherwise painful chapter. After missing the entire 2019-2020 season, Cousins was looking to prove he could still play, but this time, teams viewed him differently. He was no longer seen as a franchise cornerstone, or even a long-term piece for that matter. He became a journeyman, signing short-term deals, bouncing from team to team, hoping for a stable role. In 2020, he signed with the Houston Rockets. He showed he still had some gas in the tank, posting solid numbers in limited minutes. He could still score in the post, hit threes, and pass out of double teams, but his defense had clearly slipped. He was slower on rotations, struggling to contain quicker players, and he picked up fouls at a very high rate. The Rockets eventually waived him, choosing to go younger and faster. Next, he joined the Los Angeles Clippers. Once again, he had a few strong games. He brought energy, leadership, and veteran presence. Coaches appreciated his effort and communication on the court, but the minutes weren't consistent, and the Clippers moved on after the season. In the 2021-22 season, Cousins signed a series of 10-day contracts, first with the Milwaukee Bucks, and then with the Denver Nuggets. It was with Denver that he had one of his best showings in years. In one regular season game, he scored 31 points, showing flashes of the dominant player he once was. During the playoffs, he poured in 19 points in just 15 minutes, an efficient burst that reminded everyone of his offensive skill. Statistically, he was still productive. Per 36 minutes, his scoring and rebounding were comparable to his prime, but the league had changed. It now valued versatility, speed, and switchable defenders, and Cousins just didn't fit that mold. He could score, but teams worried about his defense, his foul trouble, and whether he could keep up with today's fast pace. Despite some good moments, no team offered him a full-time contract. The calls stopped coming, and by the end of 2022, Cousins was out of the NBA entirely. DeMarcus Cousins' story was never just about his on-court skills. His journey in the NBA was marked not only by his incredible talent, but also by his controversial reputation off the court. As one of the league's most fiery and emotional players, Cousins often found himself at odds with coaches, teammates, and officials. His quick temper and intensity made him a dominant force, but it also led to numerous incidents that colored how the public and the NBA saw him. One of the biggest stains on Cousins' reputation came from a series of off-court issues, including accusations of domestic violence. In 2019, he was accused of threatening his ex-girlfriend, which led to a police investigation. The charges were ultimately dropped, but the damage to his image had already been done. Even though the legal battle was behind him, the accusations lingered, casting a shadow over his career. The public perception of Cousins, already tainted by his on-court outbursts, became further complicated by this off-court controversy. On top of legal trouble, Cousins' relationship with the media and the NBA's executives was often strained. Bob Myers, the general manager of the Golden State Warriors at the time, once spoke about the fear teams had when it came to signing Cousins. Myers said that many organizations were afraid of how he'll act. His reputation for being volatile and unpredictable was seen as a risk for teams that were trying to build a positive culture. Even if Cousins could help a team win games, executives and coaches worried about his behavior and how it would impact their locker room dynamics. This reputation built during this time with the Sacramento Kings followed him throughout his entire career. For all of Cousins' on-court brilliance, his time in Sacramento was marked by frustrations and dysfunction. Despite being an all-star level talent, the Kings were a perennial lottery team. The front office made questionable decisions and the coaching staff seemed to be in constant turmoil. Cousins' temper, of course, didn't help matters, and he was often criticized for clashing with coaches, teammates, and even the media. And while many saw him as a misunderstood competitor, others viewed him as a ticking time bomb ready to explode at any given moment. As time went on, the NBA's culture shifted. The league became more focused on the importance of maintaining a positive team-first mentality, and emotional outbursts were no longer celebrated the way they once were. Players like Steven Jackson and Kevin Garnett, who were known for their fiery personalities, had already begun to fade from the spotlight. And while their emotions and intensity were once seen as a vital part of the game, the modern NBA has started to move in a different direction. In today's NBA, teams prefer players who are low maintenance with personalities that mesh well in a collective environment. This new trend was a significant factor in Cousins' decline. The league began to favor players with clean slates, those who didn't carry the baggage of off-court controversies or reputation issues. For role players, this became especially true. Teams needed individuals who can fit into the system and avoid distractions. While Cousins was undoubtedly talented, his emotional volatility combined with his injuries made him a difficult player to trust for many NBA franchises. As the NBA evolved, so did the way teams approach roster construction. The modern game increasingly emphasized speed, versatility, and shooting ability. In the past, dominant big men like Cousins were the focal point of their team's offenses, and their size and strength were seen as crucial advantages. But as the NBA shifted toward a more perimeter-oriented game, Cousins' traditional style became less and less appealing. Rebuilding teams, especially those in the midst of a long-term strategy, were no longer as interested in signing older, injury-prone players like Cousins. Teams focused on building for the future with an eye on younger talent and long-term potential. Players like Cousins, who had suffered major injuries, were seen as having limited mobility, didn't fit into that vision. The market for players like him had become smaller, as teams sought to avoid taking on long-term risks for players who were likely past their peak. On the other hand, contending teams that were already established as championship threats had their own specific needs. They weren't interested in rebuilding a player's career or taking on a project. Instead, They wanted to add players who could fit seamlessly into their system, providing a specific skill set that complemented their stars. For a center like Cousins, this meant that his playing style was becoming outdated. The NBA's shift towards smaller and more mobile players, especially those who could defend multiple positions, had left traditional centers like Cousins in a difficult spot. The league's top teams were looking for players who could stretch the floor, shoot three-pointers, and switch on defense. That type of versatility was highly valued, and Cousins just didn't fit that mold. His game was centered around the low post, where he used his size and strength to dominate opponents. While that made him an enforcer in his prime, it wasn't as effective in the new era of the NBA. Cousins' ball-dominant style, which had worked so well for him early in his career, was now seen as a liability. Modern teams, particularly contenders, wanted players who could play off the ball, create space, and contribute without needing to dominate the offense. And this made it harder for Cousins to find a consistent role in the league. His defense, particularly in the pick and roll, also became a major concern, as the NBA shifted towards smaller, faster players who could switch defensive assignment. And Cousins' lack of lateral quickness and his tendency to pick up fouls became a major weakness. Additionally, the NBA had more talent than ever. The rise of international players and the influx of young, skilled athletes meant that the competition for roster spots was fierce. Teams couldn't afford to take risks on players who weren't a sure fit. Veterans like Cousins, who was once considered stars, had to settle for low-risk short-term deals. For a player like him, who had proven himself as one of the best centers in the league, this was a tough pill to swallow. But the modern NBA teams had to think long-term, and Cousins simply didn't fit the league's evolving needs. It's impossible not to look back and wonder what might have been for DeMarcus Cousins if the Sacramento Kings had made smarter draft choices. Could he have been paired with players like Kawhi Leonard, Klay Thompson, or Damian Lillard? Those are just examples of a few players who could have complemented Cousins' skill set and helped elevate the Kings to the playoffs. With better support, Cousins might have avoided some of the frustrations that plagued his time in Sacramento. Instead of spending years on a losing team, he could have been part of a successful franchise that gave him the platform to showcase his talent. Cousins was also derailed by the injuries that came at the worst possible times. The Achilles injury in particular was devastating, as it ended his time with the New Orleans Pelicans just as he was playing some of the best basketball of his career. He was still in his prime, yet the injury changed everything. The torn quad and the ACL that followed compounded the damage. But these injuries weren't necessarily career-ending. Many players have come back from similar setbacks, and Cousins did show flashes of his former self after each injury. But it wasn't just the physical setbacks that held him back. It was the perception of him as a player. His emotional reputation and the league's evolving priorities made it difficult for him to find a permanent place on the team. Even still, Cousins is still only 34 years old, and many players continue to play at a high level well into their mid to late 30s, especially big men who rely more on skill than athleticism. With the right opportunity, Cousins could have a final redemption arc. He could return to the NBA, make an impact off the bench, and help a playoff team with his veteran presence and skill. And it may not be the dominant force he once was, but Cousins has proven that he has all the tools to contribute. DeMarcus Cousins' career is one of what-ifs, filled with incredible highs, painful lows, and a reputation that ultimately became his greatest obstacle. He was a player who could dominate the NBA with his unique skill set, but was undone by a combination of bad timing, injuries, mismanagement, and personal choices. His rise to stardom was meteoric, but his fall from grace was equally swift. As of now, Cousins remains outside of the NBA. He played overseas last season in Taiwan. He was training to attempt an NBA comeback, but has since given up on that. You can also catch him making appearances on the TV show Run It Back, which is hosted by Michelle Beadle, Chandler Parsons, and Lou Williams, among various different ventures. Despite everything, many fans still believe in Boogie. They see the talent and the fire that made him one of the most dominant players in the league. Whether he ever gets another chance or not, DeMarcus Cousins' legacy will always be one of extreme potential, incredible skill set, and a career that could have been so much more. But what if I told you about a guy who was a 6-time All-Star, had some of the sickest dunks you'll ever see, and became one of the NBA's most electrifying players? Just disappeared one day. If you want to know what happened to Shawn Kemp, just click right here.